Hungry Trilobyte podcast would like to start by acknowledging these fine conventions. SoonerCon. Central Oklahoma's longest-running pop culture convention is back. SoonerCon 31 is scheduled for June 30th through July 2nd, 2023, in Norman, Oklahoma. It promises a weekend full of tabletop gaming, cosplay, and appreciation for literary sci-fi as well as TV and comics. Visit SoonerCon.com for more information. The Hellmouth Convention. The Hellmouth Convention is designed by fans for fans, with the aim of harnessing the power of fandom to raise money for charities. The Hellmouth Convention celebrates all fandoms, but particularly things like Buffy, Firefly, and Dr. Horrible. Like the Hellmouth itself, things gravitate toward it that you may not find anywhere else. The next event is scheduled for June 9th through 11th, 2023, in Los Angeles, California. On tap today, I have Jeff Russo. How are you doing this afternoon, sir?
I'm good, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Jeff, you are the composer on a lot of amazing scores, but the ones that caught my eye were the ones from the newer Star Trek series, Discovery, Picard, and so on. I have been circulating the Discovery CD for quite a few months now, and I'm really loving it.
Well, I appreciate that.
I will say I like to talk creativity. I'm at a disadvantage when it comes to music because I am not a musically inclined person. I consider it a form of sorcery.
Sorcery, huh? Well, there's again, I guess there is a little bit of magic that goes into making anything. So I understand what you mean.
I am amazed at how I can listen to something like this and I'm hearing familiar ideas, familiar tunes, and blended perfectly with stuff that completely takes me by surprise and still evokes just the right mood.
I mean, I appreciate that. As difficult as it may seem, this is something that, I've enjoyed doing for a long time. So it definitely comes relatively naturally to me.
I'm glad for that. I've heard all sorts of stories about how difficult it can be to put together just the right melody, and some people would say this exactly what you've said, that it comes very naturally. And I guess my question then is, what's the difference between, how do you find that moment where things just start flowing? Is there almost a brainstorming process that comes into it, or is it a more technical one?
I mean, it's a little of both, I'd say. You sort of sit and wait for the moment to hit. And then if it doesn't, then you have to use all of the tools at your disposal to try to get there. There's a certain amount of a mix of skill and art, right? So you have to be able to put your skills to bear, and let the art sort of guide you. Sometimes the art part of it doesn't really want to come, that the muse is something that is fleeting, so sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. And when it's not, the idea is to try to find a way to get there. And that is usually through skill, the use of skill.
And I'm guessing there are some exercises or techniques that you found will at least get you going in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, drink enough coffee and something will come out.
Oh, hey, I'm on the right track then.
Yeah.
When you are trying to pull something like this, something that, for me, music is a very emotional thing, and I'm sure that's not 100% of people would say that. How do you get very technical about something that's designed to invoke emotion? Is there a certain point at which you can say this needs to sound this way?
I mean, it isn't using skill to evoke emotion. It's being able to connect with the emotion of a scene, right? And that's a big part of it. Being able to connect with the actual narrative and the emotions of the characters is a very important part of what we do. And I would say that's the way that you are able to find the thing that can manipulate emotion.
And I feel like I'm going up to Jim Henson and asking how Kermit works. I realize these can be very basic questions for you, but it's easy to look at a script and see where the story is going to go. It's easy to, kind of guess where the actors are going to go, or even how the visual effects are going to take it. But how much of the script do you have in front of you when you're just trying to look at the music and the mood? Is it usually a full script? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't usually get partial scripts. Scripts are, I get sent a script that's done, and that is usually what I have to go on when they haven't shot yet. So that's how that works. I mean, I get sent a script early on, so I get an idea as to what the story is trying to say, and once I've read the script, I start to try to get inside the heads of the characters, and then that usually inspires me to write something.
Really interesting, really interesting. And when you're looking at this, how much do you draw on the vast library of previous scores that have been in something like a Star Trek, where you have decades of movies and TV shows with their own unique spin on the music?
Well, I mean, I only do that when it is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And it can become necessary when I want to evoke a certain character or feeling from something previous. I've done that a number of times in Trek, where, in the first season of Picard, for instance, when we first saw the Romulan at the end, I evoked Fred Steiner's Romulan theme from from the original series, and I use little things like that in order to really take the viewer on a journey. And some people hear it and some people don't. I try to do it in a subtle way, not too over the top or on the nose, but those things are very helpful in Trek, where there is previous iconic thematic material. And it's the easiest way for me to get from point A to point B, when talking about or dealing with a character that is, nostalgic in that way.
My favorite note, and it's one that's been talked about a lot, but it works so well. Working in the melody from the Inner Light on the flute into Picard, the actual moment where music itself does become part of the story. To not use that, I think would have been a miss.
Well, I didn't use the music of the Inner Light, the piece The Inner Light, which I didn't want to use. I used the flute because in the Inner Light, Jean-Luc learns to play the flute, and that was an important part of that narrative, and I thought it was an important thing to call back to. What I did reference was a small moment of music where Picard's son is playing flute in that episode, and there's this one like 3-note melody that I reference.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what people are misinterpreting as the Inner Light theme, which it's not. And I find it to be pretty interesting because it's a very subliminal call out or callback to, because it in the episode itself, that piece of music flies by. It's like 3 seconds long, or 4 seconds long maybe. And I actually only referenced 3 notes of it, but a lot of people caught it, and it was really, really great that people did. I was very, very happy that people did.
Sure, and it's a great distinction that you're making there between the melody played and the actually calling it the Inner Light theme, which I realize it is not, and I shouldn't have said that. However, we're both talking about the same thing here,
Right.
And yeah, it's Picard in particular. It's a great way of looking at it as the story of a man's full life and it coming full circle.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sense of finality and cosmic justice or cosmic injustice, depending on what your point of view is. And I think it lends itself well to being packaged as in that other story where he experienced somebody else's life in a very real way. He was given his own little show to watch, and he pulled that away from it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think that was very indicative of how Jean-Luc was in his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And to have an entire episode devoted to his having lived an entire lifetime in a very short period of time, as a result of this that anomaly, that the whatever that was, satellite, that brought him, that was very indicative of his life. And I think that showing that in connecting that to his life now was sort of an important thing for me to do.
You seem to really enjoy doing your homework to put these themes together. I will say that there's an excitement in your voice as to how you connected all this that I feel very, very just strong, genuine connection there.
I mean, yeah, I'm a big fan. I started out as a big fan. Next Generation was what I grew up on. And so it was really important to me to treat the narrative in this character with the utmost musical respect, and trying to connect the dots between what had come before and what was coming after. One of the things I really worked diligently on was to be able to connect but not stay implanted in the past, and yet as I'm pushing forward in this musical idea, to make sure that proper homage was paid to what had come before. I think that generally speaking, Captain Picard really lived his life in that same way, forging forward, but always paying very close attention and paying homage to what came before him.
That's an amazing way to put it, for sure. So if we look a little more at what came before for you, maybe stepping away from Star Trek as a whole, are there certain works that were just really formative and pushing forward your desire to get into this kind of field?
I mean, no, I would say I never even imagined myself as a film, television composer. I was in a rock band my whole life until about, I'm still in a rock band, but my entire career was based around being an artist, from when I was a teenager. And the band I started in the early 90s was my entire career all the way through until about 2009, yeah. And then about 2009, we made our last record that we made. And I started working in film and television anyway. And in doing so, I never really had a thought before that in doing it. I've always loved film music, but it never occurred to me that I could do it. And when I had a chance to do it, the bug really bit me hard. So
I can see that. And right now, there's probably somebody listening to this who really feels like this is their calling in life, to get into film music or TV music or just composition in general, and might be feeling really discouraged. Is there something that you'd want to advise them to do or not do to put them on to the next level?
no, there's no answer to that question. I get asked that question a lot, and there isn't really an answer to that. I think that the key to being able to do this job well is empathy. And I kind of think that empathy might be the key to life in general. But, the ability to do the job of putting music to stories is really more important than being able to write really great music, is the ability to connect to the characters and to the story. Because you can't help tell a story, or you can't really tell a story unless you're truly connected to the story itself or to the characters. But in terms of like trying to figure out how to do it, like if that's your lifelong dream, you know, I can't, there isn't an answer to that question. There's so many variables that go into getting into a career in the arts. You know, it's doing the right thing, being in the right place at the right time, having the right music, meeting the right people. You know, there's a lot of luck involved, which is, you know, an unfortunate part of art. You know, I think that the most important thing when thinking about doing art as a living, you know, when you merge art and commerce, is that if you want to be true, then be true and stay true to yourself. Don't try to do something just because you think it's the thing that's in vogue, or the thing that people want to hear. You know, just do your thing. And those, I think, are the people who have the most success, are definitely the people who look at it that way. You know, people who forge ahead.
That comes back to your sense of empathy, and that when you connect with those characters, you're the only person who can connect with them in the way you connect with them. It's always going to be an individual reaction, and you can't duplicate that, and to try isn't sincere.
Well, that's right. And that's why every composer is different, and why hiring me or hiring another person for the same project, you end up with very, very, very different feeling project, not just music, but everything feels different. Because as you put different people in the same position, you change the course of the narrative itself.
It's like I can listen to your score, and some of the motifs might be similar to stuff done by Jerry Goldsmith, Jay Chataway, and yet the actual effect on me in the end is extremely different. The actual the way I relate to it, the reason I even put that CD on, because I actually still use CDs, I'm weird like that, it is because I'm getting something specific to what you're intending.
Yep, that's very true.
And I at first thought that was just because it's a different show, it's a different story, it's a different phase in my life, but it's honestly, it's in the baked music itself.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I want to thank you so much for doing this, and I really appreciate this chat because I've gotten a whole lot out of it, and I feel like I've grown to appreciate your work a lot more. Where can people follow you on the internet and follow your adventures?
They can see stuff on Twitter, Jefferson Russo. I'm on Instagram. I have a website, jeffrusso.com. Like, it's all over the place. There's stuff everywhere about it. I'm not really great with keeping things updated, but I try to do as good of a job as I can.
I'm going to make sure all that gets put on the show notes on my website, aaronbossig.com. Jeff, I want to thank you so much for doing this, and you're welcome to come on back anytime.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. I really appreciate talking to you.